Welcome to Appreciating the Entrepreneurial Journey, the podcast for business owners who want to see around corners and thrive financially. Your host is Cannon Carr, CEO and business owner at CornerCap. Tune in every week for lessons learned from the trenches of entrepreneurship, business success, and financial independence.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is Cannon Carr, your host. Today we get to spend time with one of Atlanta's great thinkers, business leaders, and entrepreneurs. In fact, not just our city, but arguably from anywhere. Our guest today is Glen Jackson. He is co-founder of Jackson Spalding, one of Atlanta's preeminent public relations and marketing agencies. It's a firm he's grown from 8 people about 28 years ago into now 4 offices and many satellite offices spanning the United States and including 150 people serving leading household brands like Delta, Chick-fil-A, Coca-Cola, Google, Publix, as well as several leading universities and important nonprofits. He is also author of a book called Preeminence, which delves into how companies can sustain a preeminent position in their marketplaces. Glen and his team basically are a place to go to solve some of the deepest challenges that businesses, companies, and communities face. And we're excited to have him on the program. What I think you'll really enjoy today is hearing Glen talk about entrepreneurship in his own words and talk in particular about his own journey as a founder and entrepreneur and business owner and working with his team to grow Jackson Spalding into one of the leading agencies in the United States. In particular, you'll hear him talk about how culture, values, and character matter. These are words that leaders often use, often try to implement. It's often difficult to do, but you'll hear about how Glen, through stories and through insights and just behaviors, are able to instill these into the decisions that his company makes and he as a leader makes, particularly in those challenging times, those crises where leaders actually have their best impact. It's a great episode with just many stories and memorable insights. It's timeless. So sit back and enjoy the conversation with Glen. Well, Glen, we're excited to have you with us today, and I figure we'll just jump right in. Today, in hindsight, it looked easy in a way. I mean, Jackson Spalding is now one of the leading public relations and marketing firms in the U.S. You're working with some of the greatest global brands. But, so in hindsight, maybe it was inevitable. But I'd like to go back to just initially those beginning days. Did you always want to be an entrepreneur to get started? And tell us about those early days.
I did not always want to be an entrepreneur. The opportunity just presented itself, actually, Cannon, when I was 31 years of age, to lead a New York-based public relations firm and co-found our agency, Jackson Spalding, with Bo Spalding. I felt really called to do it. There was needability. I think you always need to have what I call needability when you start a business, and that is there's a void in the marketplace that you can fill. And we saw that there was not a public relations firm in Atlanta owned by Atlanta natives who had deep connections with the city and state. So we used that needability to get going.
So, so you had basically started out working, I think, for another agency and said, look, there'll be an opportunity for me to do really more along the values I believe in. And that's kind of what gave the genesis to the 8-person startup.
Yeah, that's right. The entrepreneurial journey requires a lot of stamina and determination. It has, as has been said, success is sweaty. It's not sexy, arduous, not glamorous, but it was well worth it. And we've got a great team moving us forward now as an agency. We have 150 people now in 4 offices.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing story through the years. Well, I love one of your early stories. You said your first account came about through a wonderful example of building trust. And I'd love for you to share that with us right now.
The baseball card story or the story with Truett?
Well, kind of both. The one I had in mind, I think, was the one with Walmart in the New York agency. Yeah.
Yeah, I played college soccer at Washington and Lee and was coaching a team when I was in my early 30s made up of 7-year-old girls. And my goalkeeper, Elizabeth, was our best player, and her dad, Army Perry, became a friend. And he was a consultant for Walmart. And this was back before Google, Cannon, so you had no idea what people did, and there was no LinkedIn. But he told me, he said, hey, I understand you started a business. I'd love to come see you and see your space. Well, we had sublease space in an office building here in Midtown with some cheesy posters and some rented furniture. And he came rolling in and told me that he consulted for Walmart, and they were doing a promotion. It was very big for Walmart, and they had hired a New York firm, and my heart kind of sank when he said that. But maybe down the road they could use us. So as Army was leaving, I asked him, how are you going to promote the Walmart promotion with the New York firm? And he mentioned a couple of ideas that they had presented to him. And I got on a flip chart with another guy at our office, and we gave him about 7 more ideas. And he liked them. He really liked them. And we worked over the weekend to tighten them up. And that Monday morning, I sent him the ideas. We couriered it to him back then, and I couriered those to him with a note that said, here are some ideas we talked about Friday. Good luck on the promotion. Give this to the New York firm. We're cheering everybody on. Well, about a week later, I got a call from Army, and he said, hey, Walmart loved your plan. I love the plan. My question for you is, how much can we pay you for the plan?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, not a dime. I said, we did that to sharpen our saw at our agency, and it was a real pleasure. And he said, come on, Glenn. He goes, I've been to your office, your little office. Can I at least send you a check for $3,000? And I said, no. And I told Bo Spalding no, that I said no. And he said, that was the right decision. And I knew I had a partner for life with Bo when he said that. And so we didn't take the money.
Yeah. And that had to hurt, right? Were you thinking, wow, I could use this for cash flow, right? I mean, we're starting a business here.
Yeah, we would have worked for the cleaners downstairs. We were hanging on by our fingertips, just surviving. But we said no, character success is more important than circumstance success. And that was the right thing to do. And about 3 weeks later, though, he called me back and he said, guess what? He said, we let our New York agency go as it relates to this promotion we're doing with Walmart, and you're now our agency, and we're FedExing you a check for $15,000, and you can't say no this time. You're on board.
That is
awesome.
Gave
us a really nice tailwind early on.
Well, you'd almost write a movie about that one, right? I mean, things happen in a surprising way. I'm sure did you expect that?
No. Yeah. The red light back then, those phones that you got a message, a red light was blinking, and I got the message from him. I had no idea why he was calling me back after our conversation the first time, but it was a pleasant surprise.
Well, so like you said, so in the early days, that was an early anchor tenant for you to get started. There's another story
1995.
too. 1995. Well, and there's another story, and you alluded to it just a moment ago, that I love, where it's an example of preparation. It looks like luck in terms of timing, but in reality, it's not. It's preparation. But this relationship was able to turn in one of your largest national accounts. Tell us how that story got started.
Wow. I love telling this story because it's so important to our agency now. We're now Chick-fil-A's national agency of record for their public relations support. But one of our dream clients in Atlanta, was to one day work for Chick-fil-A when we started our business in 95. And my first business trip to Washington, D.C., I had just gotten my business cards and I was proud of them. And I stuffed about 50 in my pocket as I headed to Washington, D.C. that morning. And I was on the back of the Delta plane for the trip to D.C. And I looked up, and Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A, was on the plane. And I was wondering, gosh, should I give him my business card and introduce myself and tell him about who I am? And, my emotional intelligence kind of kicked in. I said, no, I'm just not going to do that. That would be weird. Too salesy, too pushy.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we're about. So I held off. But when we got to baggage claim, I went into the bathroom, the men's room. It was about 10 o'clock, and I was washing my hands, and Truett Cathy came in. And I waited for him, and he started washing his hands right next to me. And I had just read his book, It's Easier to Succeed Than to Fail, Cannon. And I looked at him and I said, Mr. Cathy, it's easier to succeed than to fail.
Hmm.
I just stopped right there. And he looked at me and he said, that's right. He said, what's your name? And I said, my name's Glen Jackson. We just started a business in Atlanta, and I just so admire your values. We're going to try to live those values out too at our agency. And he said, Glenn, I think you're going to do well. Let me give you something. And he reached into his pocket and gave me a Be Our Guest card to get a free chicken sandwich. And it was signed by him. And he walked out. That was it. And I'm holding the card and I'm just looking at it and remembering our conversation about Chick-fil-A being a dream client one day. And I said, I'm going to keep this card, this Be Our Guest card, in my wallet until we work for him. So I left it in my wallet for 10 years. And we eventually became their agency. But that's not the end of the story. I look over at the carousel with all the luggage coming down, and he was over there helping a 25-year-old young lady with all her luggage who was pregnant at the time and had been on the plane. And he refused to let her get any luggage. Drew was probably 75 at the time. And I was watching the whole thing. Great example of servant leadership for me as a young man. And he got her all set up on the push cart, and she said, thank you. And he looked at her and said, my pleasure.
Oh, wow.
And off she went. And from there, he went to give a talk to the Washington Press Club and then meet with the President of the United States. And for Truett, that meeting with the young lady was just as important as meeting with the President. He was just that much of a servant leader, in my opinion. He just loved serving people and caring for people.
Well, I love that. Yeah, well, I love that extra part of the story too. I mean, your preparation and being ready to surprise him in a way and show your thoughtfulness, but at the same time, just him being an incredible example of natural leadership, taking care of that woman at the carousel and then heading on to the White House. So that kind of story will stick with you.
It does.
That is awesome. All right, well, so you've gotten these two big wins. At that point, did you say, hey, I'm going to make it with Jackson Spalding, we're off to the races? Is that when you knew you were a successful entrepreneur?
I didn't. I just felt like we had so much more work to do. It took us 10 years to eventually work for Chick-fil-A after that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
We just kept staying
perseverance, right?
Humble and hungry. Jim Collins, the great writer of Good to Great, writes about the genius of the and. Two things that you think are diametrically opposed that actually work together. Humble and hungry, gracious and ambitious, patient and persistent, egoless and relentless. And I just focused on the genius of the and as we built our agency. Our big break really was in 1999, 4 years later, when we won Delta and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And that gave us some momentum. You can really feel momentum as an entrepreneur. You really feel it. And it excites you. And you think, gosh, what else can we do? Let's keep going. And that was really the big moment for us, 1999.
That's great. So, but the power, the genius of the and I love that concept, is really, that was with you at those early days, right? A part of the inspiration.
It was.
And it took, I won't say it took 10 years to feel that momentum because you were already getting some wins, but it wasn't a quick process, right? It was a deliberate process.
It was very deliberate, and we were very patient and stayed true to our values. One thing that I actually have the word written on a card on my desk is the word remain, REMAIN. And the phrase above it is, it's easier to become a success than to remain a success. And I think the best entrepreneurial enterprises are committed to remaining a success. And that's what drives us today. We want to remain and stay very, very focused on our clients and serve them every day with fierce strategic thinking and implementation.
That's a powerful concept of remain, because you're right. It's easy to get a quick win and maybe have a little luck and not be prepared for it. Remain, and your preparation as an example shows how you can sustain and remain. Sustain is another word you and I've talked a lot about as well. And I've always loved the word sustain.
And we've talked about, there are four things I think an entrepreneurial business should never stop doing. One, never stop investing in relationships. I mean, we are still living in a relational economy. So one, never stop investing in relationships. Two, never stop seeing top talent. I mean, you never know when you need that talent. So never stop seeing top talent. Three is never stop staying true to your values and purpose. That is your fundamental cornerstone, or your values and purpose. And then finally, number four is never stop looking for a better way. What's the better way to solve this problem, better way to start a business. Keep that better way mindset front and center.
Well, so how do you make sure those those four principles, for example, you now have 100, you said 150 team members now, is that right?
Yes, sir.
So how do you build that into the everyday life of a culture? Because I know you talk about how important culture is to success.
For us, one of our 8 values is we always look for a better way, Cannon. And we read our values at every staff meeting someone does from our agency. It's a reminder for all of us of why we have our business in the first place and what we're accountable to. So the looking for a better way mindset for us is foundationally and fundamentally essential, and focusing on that one really gives us a lot of clarity on decision making. I treat every day as if I just opened our doors here. So today, we just opened our doors. We're 28 years old now, but we just opened our doors today. And like Chick-fil-A, which has to serve a fresh sandwich every day, we're in the freshness business too. We've got to be fresh in our thinking, our strategic ideas, our implementation, fresh with ideas that we present. And so that keeps me on the balls of my feet and connects me back to let's remain a success.
Well, and it reminds me two words with "and" you used earlier, the humble and hungry, right? It's incredible that 28 years later, you're still living that. And, it's a reminder for all of us about kind of the key to duration there.
You know what, too? I'll just say one thing, too, that's important for everybody to hear. A successful business is about everyone. It's not about someone. It's the collective energy and power of the team, the esprit de corps of that team. And that's so important too. And remaining fanatically focused on your business, and also not being afraid to change. Managers make widgets and leaders make change. That's what Seth Godin wrote about in one of his books. And I agree with that. We have to embrace change as entrepreneurs and continually shape the clay of our business as it evolves. Accept and embrace change. Don't push back on it. And that is an important thing to remember on your entrepreneurial journey.
Absolutely. And I want to pick up on a theme, but I do want to just amplify one more time. You mentioned you read your values at every staff meeting.
Correct.
Which most people I talk to don't do that. Does it get old? Does it get trite?
No.
Yeah.
You know why it doesn't? That's a great question. I love that. Because we have somebody different read it every time. And they amplify different words.
Wow, that's
one of
magic.
Our values is we're of the highest integrity. And someone read our values last time, and I heard her say, this is one of my favorites. We are of the highest integrity. That's great. And also, too, in this virtual world we're living in, the folks that are listening in hear it. And it's powerful for them, and it's powerful for the people who are in the office.
I love that. All right. So you'd mentioned keeping, when you want to, as an entrepreneur, be ready for change and have that mindset and be prepared to always find a better way.
Yeah.
Part of the theme of this podcast series is to explore those periods where entrepreneurs and business owners have had to manage through disruptions, right? In other words, yep. All right. So let's put it to the test. You always look for a better way. Sometimes forces come and not only introduce change, but try to force you to change. And were there times when Jackson Spalding hit those periods of disruption, either from, an external event or whatnot? How did you respond to that change? How did you navigate through it? And was there a time maybe something failed and you had to fail fast? Help us think through some of that.
Well, we've been through a lot of change here in 28 years.
Right. Yep.
We've had a lot of disruptions, from starting a business to 9/11 to the Great Recession of 2008-9 to the pandemic. And Andy Stanley said something I really like. He said, you can't eradicate uncertainty. You just have to navigate uncertainty. And the best leaders navigate well. That has helped us to just think of the word navigate when you're facing disruption. And then going back to what do our values tell us, and what's important to our clients, and what decisions need to be made here. I like sleeping on decisions, by the way. Give it to the sleep committee. Don't feel like you have to make that immediate decision. If you have time, sleep on it. Be careful with late afternoon decisions, and get people's opinion on things. That's important too. But those challenges that we've faced as a business have steeled our determination and have made us stronger. And there actually can be opportunities to really make some decisions you've been dragging your feet on during those tough times, and go ahead and make them, because the best leaders make, I think, really, really great decisions during difficult times.
Well, that's interesting, right? The difficult times, expand on that a little bit. In other words, difficult times occur, and I guess that's what tests your values, where you refine them, where you hone them. Is that kind of what you're uncovering?
Yeah. And there are two types of decisions. I don't know you and I have ever talked about this, but I'll do it in 1 minute.
Okay.
They're hard, easy decisions, and they're easy, hard decisions. Okay. When we started our business, Ken, I think we went easy, hard. We'd go the easy route with a tough conversation, and it would be kind of pushed under the rug with a client or employee, and it would get harder. It would just get harder versus going hard, easy. It's a tough conversation to have. It's a tough decision to make. It's a big moment for you, but it gets easier after you've made the hard decision. So one of the biggest takeaways I've had in my career now, almost 40 years in the PR industry, is, and running a business for 28, is go hard, easy, not easy, hard. And that will, over time, I think, benefit your business and help you navigate those tough times with a lot of integrity and intelligence.
That's a powerful concept. And you're right. You and I haven't talked about it yet. And while protecting the innocent, do you have is there a story that comes to mind that kind of underscores that, where you did have that hard conversation up front? And the reason I want to explore it a little bit is, how do you have the confidence to have that hard conversation? How do you know you've researched it so that is the right question up front, and you're not going to destroy the relationship in the process?
Yeah, I mean, we've had to have some hard easies with some clients. It just didn't work out for us, and it just wasn't going in the direction we liked early on in our business, and we had to say goodbye. And
so you're actually talking about, right, with purpose and intent, you walked away from clients that weren't the right fit.
Yeah. And then we've had some, hard easies here with some of our folks. And, what's happened too is a lot of times after the hard easy, they end up truly actualizing their full potential.
Mm-hmm.
The best cultures actualize the potential of their people. It's like a greenhouse where instead of plants growing, the people are growing inside of that greenhouse, where ideas and people are flourishing together. And sometimes when you have hard easies with people working with you, that's what they need to hear. And then they will really step up to the plate and actualize that potential that you see in them. The easy part actually can hurt them more. See what I'm saying?
Right. I do. No, it's powerful. And does it actually build trust, in an odd way?
It does, because you're speaking the truth.
Right.
And, as Covey said, nothing moves faster than the speed of trust. I will add, except the speed of distrust. But, it does. It does. And trust is the most important 5-letter word in all of business. Trust is a must. They did a study, Towers Watson did a study about 10 years ago with low trust and high trust businesses. And they realized in their study that high trust businesses outperform low trust businesses by 300%.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. So, this conversation's underscoring that it's not easy to actually build that trust, right? It's so easy to destroy it, working deliberately at it. And I love the concept of the hard conversation early. Thank you for introducing that. What reminds me too, you'd mentioned earlier the profile of the dream client you had in the early days. And the reason I want to go back to it is because I think, successful businesses have that ideal client profile that keeps them front and center, so that they know what they're looking for. And there's another phrase I've come across that's interesting. There's distractions masquerading as opportunities. So as you tell us, just what was the dream client profile? You don't have to say literally what it was, but how did you form it, and give us a little insight on how that's guided your decisions?
Well, for us, our dream client goes back to our purpose statement, which we haven't talked about. We actually have a purpose statement. And our purpose is to cultivate meaningful relationships rooted in mutual respect. I'll say that again. Our purpose is to cultivate meaningful relationships rooted in mutual respect. So the dream client treats us with mutual respect, Cannon. And the dream client is a long-term relationship with our agency. we've had public supermarkets now for 28 years.
Mm-hmm.
Coca-Cola Company over 20, Delta over 25. We like long-term relationships, and we want to work with organizations that treat us with mutual respect and value the importance of communications, because that's our strength. We help companies communicate with clarity and integrity to the critical audiences they want to influence positively over time. And when we see that need and we can help them, that's a great thing, because we know we can do it together.
That's wonderful. Well, you can see that formula has worked through time, and I think you've stayed consistent there. Let me ask this. I often like to get this perspective. I think, entrepreneurs, successful ones, start with an end game in mind. I think this purpose you've had is a little bit of an articulation of what that ideal client and ultimately end game relationship is. Over time, certainly your end game changes, right? Has your concept of success in the business changed over time, or has it stayed pretty consistent?
It stayed focused on the client.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of entrepreneurial businesses suffer from the what I call the SOS syndrome. You know what that is?
No.
The shiny object syndrome.
Okay.
And they see something that that's shiny, and they move over there, and they move over there, and they move over there, and they lose the focus of their business. And we have decided that our fanatical focus for our business is really twofold: our people and our clients, period.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to start there. And then after that is our community. My job at Jackson Spalding is twofold, really. It's to help serve our clients and to pour into our people.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about this before. The P&L means profit and loss, but for me, it's also people and lives. And I want to pour into the people and lives, particularly now with everybody dealing with a lot of stuff post-COVID. I want to pour into our people and their lives. So that's the P&L for me, in addition to our bigger P&L on the financial front. But be careful with the shiny object syndrome. Stay fanatically focused. The best businesses do. And we have just zeroed in on clients every day.
Well, it's wonderful. And your SOS principle is similar to that. Opportunity distractions masquerading as opportunities too, which I think is the same kind of concept. Well, just last question on that front. Often people will say, our goal is to be, we started regional, now we're going to be national. You've got 4 formal offices in the U.S., and I think you've got another 8 kind of like satellite offices from there. You got global relationships. Do you articulate success in those terms, or do those for you follow naturally from focusing on people, focusing on clients?
We want to grow. So we're proud of that growth, because those markets you just listed, Athens, LA, Dallas, and Atlanta, are important to our clients. They need our presence in those markets. We do a lot of work for the University of Georgia, so we're in Athens. And, growth is a byproduct to me of having clarity of where you want to focus on as a business. The growth will come over time, but I didn't expect to have offices in all those locations when we started in 1995. It's just evolved. It's been organic.
Yeah.
And it's been also opportunistic. We saw an opportunity and we pursued it in Dallas, at Athens, and LA. We have several people in LA now. The opportunity surfaced, pursue it, and don't be afraid to take that calculated risk to go into that market.
I love
another idea.
Well, what I love about this conversation is, so we've, many in our business world have benefited from your insights, your wisdom. But hearing you actually implement these, it just naturally, and how you've run your own business is pretty amazing. So I'm enjoying this part of that conversation. So thank you.
Saying that. We got a lot more work to do. We're just getting started, and we'll treat it that way every day. We just got a lot more to do, and it's a real privilege.
Well, and there's another topic you alluded to too, just character versus circumstance. And I think that is worth highlighting in this context too, because I know you build culture and you make your hiring decisions on the concept of character. So walk us through how that's been a guiding principle too.
Man, well, one of our values is we're of the highest integrity. So character and integrity are interlinked, inextricably linked.
Right.
And the bigger you get, watch out. That's when that character piece can lose value, and you become getting more circumstance success oriented. The character of a leader of a business, it starts at the top, and the leaders of the organizations that are really running a successful entrepreneurial enterprise need to realize that everything they say is heard, everything they do is seen, and everywhere they go, they represent the brand. And you have to do that with the highest of integrity and character, period.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's shift just for a little bit. I mean, so we've talked about your leadership in building this organization, but looking at yourself, right, as the business owner, has your definition of success changed personally, for Glenn through this journey?
It has.
Tell us about that. How it started, and maybe it's you're getting started. You're like, I just want to do. I love your phrase, great work and good works. Right? Maybe that got you started. But tell us a little bit about how it's changed.
Well, I was 31 when we started, so we just had our third child. I was so determined to not see our business fail that that's kind of what I measured my success against. And that was a mistake, because I think I lost some needed focus on my family during that process. So in a way, I guess you could say I had an affair with my business for the first couple of years, and that's not a good thing. And now I'm really focused on family and being the best husband and father and friend I can be, and community leader, not letting our business own me.
Can you, in the early stages when you're fighting for survival, can you honor that what you became, though? I mean, how can you do both?
It was so hard.
Yeah. And I'm not sure
14-hour days.
Right. Is it doable? Frankly, I mean, if many families make sacrifices so that the, entrepreneur owner can succeed, and hopefully those relationships survive. Sometimes it's tough for them to.
Yes, it was so hard. And Claire, my wife, was so good about it, because I was never around I wasn't around much first couple of years.
Right.
I'm still making up for lost time with her, and I'm working on that.
Well, and it's well worth it. Absolutely.
And I think as you get older, I'm 60 this year. You have different seasons in your life. There's different definitions of success, I think, probably in all those different seasons. And consistency is so important, I think, for us as people. Our family, my people here, need to see a consistent Glenn, not an inconsistent Glenn. When they see me, they want to see the same person they saw yesterday, and same with my family. And that I think consistency is not talked about enough in life and business. Let's be consistent in our actions and our behavior, our decisions, at home and at work. Truett Cathy was the same everywhere he went. He wasn't a different person at home and then in business. I saw him as just the same man every day in front of any audience. With that girl at the airport to the president, he was the same person. And that conserved his energy. I think that was one of his strengths. He didn't waste that energy, because he was the same person. It didn't require any extra dose of energy. He just was the same person. And I'm working on that too.
Well, that's powerful. On another podcast episode, I'll ask who your heroes are. We won't go into that today, because I think that'll take us off today's topic. But I think there's some powerfulness in that. Well, let me maybe I've got three more questions. We'll just kind of hop through them. But one of the things that we've alluded to a little bit here is you have to believe in your future, right? And at the same time, you have to be able to pivot and adapt. So when is stubbornness a virtue, and when is it a vice as a business owner?
What a great question. God. Wow. Well, when you get started on something, it's a virtue, because you're just focused, and you're just not going to let go of this idea you have. You're going to try to make it work. It can get to be a problem when you try to hold on to it too tightly, and you don't let others hold it with you. And You don't depend on the team, and you're not afraid to change, like we talked about. Managers make widgets, leaders make change, and we have to be amenable to change and embrace smart change. And that can be a vice if you don't, due to your stubbornness. I think that I replace stubbornness as a virtue canon with resiliency. I think resiliency is the virtue. It's that never giving up, never giving out, never giving in the arena of competition. Striving, straining, succeeded. That's where the resiliency comes from. Resiliency, in its literal definition, is like a tree that's been bent, and it bends back to its original shape after the wind. And you've got to stay resilient in your company as you move along. Not stubborn. Not stubborn. I don't like the word stubborn. Period. Probably.
Right. Replace. You're saying let's replace stubbornness with resiliency. And
a word like that.
Well, and side shoot question is, as the business owner or one of the lead ones and one of the two founders, is that a lonely job? Not
anymore, because we have 8 partners. We really work together as a team. Yeah. It was lonely the first 10 to 15 years at times, when the onus of the responsibilities was all on your shoulders. It can be a lonely job. That's why I think you've got to stay connected in your business life and personal life with other people. Having friends that you can just talk to and connect with, who are just treating you as a real friend, not a deal friend.
Right.
We need real friends, not deal friends.
Yeah.
Hey, can we got deal friends now. Hey, can you give me tickets to so and so, or can you introduce me to that person?
That's you can always find a deal friend, right?
Let's be real friends.
Yeah. Well, so one of the themes we often we drive through on this podcast series is the concept of financial freedom, financial independence for the business owner, and how the concept of liquidity along the way can help keep options going. Maybe reflect a little bit on your journey. I mean, when did you get to financial freedom, and what does that mean to you ultimately?
I got to financial freedom probably in the 18th or 20th year of our business, where I had some headroom.
Yeah, and I'm not talking literally, like when did you, truly get free from the business, but there's that difference of being when you're starting scrappy and cash flow is constrained, and you have to make those personal choices between business and yourself. Where at some point you get a little bit relieved on that, and so I was just exploring that. So that maybe 18 years is when you got enough just consistency on the cash flow, you didn't have to reinvest. Those kind of things.
Yeah, 15. I did a study on preeminence, which is a Greek word that means first in rank in Greek. And preeminent organizations, it takes 10 to 15 years to become preeminent. And that was kind of our range there. But, when you have some financial freedom and independence, it helps you hopefully become more generous in some areas where you can be generous. When you refresh others, you refresh yourself. And generosity is really a beautiful thing when you can be generous with your time. You can be generous with your resources. You can be generous also with your expertise. Give somebody an hour or two that hopefully will help their business grow. When they're 31 and now you're 59, you can say, look, here's what I remember at your age when you were starting the business. And generosity is a lot of different things. Don't just associate it with money.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Don't just associate it with money.
Right.
I'll wrap this up with one thing. I think there's some ships that help all businesses sail. And that's leadership, stewardship, mentorship, workmanship, which is your craft, citizenship, relationships, and entrepreneurship, those ships that help all businesses sail. And one of those is mentorship, and being generous with people and mentoring them is so important.
Well, you've lived that, and including for myself too. So thank you on behalf of so many of us for that. Last question. Usually I ask, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs just getting started, either, having a dream, being in a corporate world and looking to go out on their own, or, facing a tough time getting started. You've already given so much now that I think, we've got plenty of advice for those entrepreneurs. What I'd like to spend a little bit is last question. When you look back on yourself, and not only what advice would you have given you, but what's been the hardest thing for you to learn in your own journey? And maybe that's a backdoor way of saying, what advice would you give yourself?
Relax more.
Relax more.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to work out over time. So try to find periods of relaxation in the midst of the grind. I had trouble doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that is you got to get away.
Get away.
Relax. Yeah. It's take that trip that you've been debating. And, I read recently that, and I've written about this, that change of pace plus change of place equals a change of perspective. And I've found that some of my best thinking has occurred when I've changed my pace and my place, and I come back with a better perspective because of that.
Love that, because, we all want to relax, right? But it's hard to do when you're in the throes of making things happen. And so it requires some faith and some trust to do that. But once again, you've spun that though and gone deeper to say, that concept of pace and place giving you perspective and maybe even regeneration. There becomes a purpose even in relaxing. It serves a purpose to refresh, but also change perspective. And I go back to, you're always looking for a different way or a better way. There you go. You've brought it all back full circle. Well, Glen, this is awesome. Thank you very much. I've loved every minute of our conversation, and I know our listeners are going to as well. And hearing your personal journey is just a wonderful experience.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate our friendship. You mean the world to me.
Oh, well, thank you. You've been a great mentor for me. So we'll and you've helped me in many occasions. So really appreciate your time today, and we will stay in touch. Thanks, Glen.
Thank you.
All right, Canon Carr back with you. What a great segment we had with Glen Jackson. And I actually have with us here in the podcast studio, Claudia Bettinger, who's, of course, our producer for the show, and she's just done a great job this season. So we were going to reflect just for a few minutes on probably 3 or 4 key themes that we thought we would highlight with this conversation with Glen. But as usual, Glen fashion, there's so many jewels and so much wisdom in it that, it's hard to wrap up into 3, but we'll try. But first, Claudia, I thought I would ask you, there were a lot of quotes in there. I actually went through and wrote down like 10 or 15 different quotes he had. Were there any that struck you that you wanted to take note of?
Yeah, my favorite was actually when he said, when you refresh others, you refresh yourself. And I just thought that went back to what outstanding leadership he talks about the entire interview, and really exemplifies who he is as a person and a business owner. Oh, yeah.
That's awesome. The one I loved, he said, it's easier to become a success than to remain a success. And that one, like yours, I mean, it gets to a higher level, the refreshing side. But here he's talking about, being in for the long game, not being in for the short game. And I don't know if you had a reaction to remaining a success as well.
Nowadays everything's so fast moving. I'm on TikTok, and you see those small businesses that have their viral 5 minutes of fame, and they order all this product, and then they can't get rid of it because they weren't able to sustain that success. And I think capitalizing on it and being able to turn it into a long-term business, especially the way that Glen has, is just incredibly impressive and key to maintaining your small business.
Absolutely. You reminded me too. He talked about character being more important than circumstance, right? Character success and not circumstance success. And that example you talked about with TikTok, I mean, you become a circumstantial success in the short term, but it's not a long-term sustainable one. It's more about character there. So I'm sure our listeners have other quotes that they would want to share too, but those 2 in particular are just awesome. Well, let's just touch on maybe those 3 or 4 key themes that I think are highlighted in this segment with Glen. And in particular, broadly, I thought he did a great job of basically laying a template for long-term consistent growth. The whole purpose of this podcast is to be able to help entrepreneurs and business owners see around corners and achieve success. I mean, that's a key component of what we do. And as a first point in that key theme is just values and culture. Values and culture are easy to talk about, and yet you get a sense from Glen, it drives everything they do. It's not just words. It's key to who they work with, who they hire, even why and how they grow.
Absolutely. I really, that one quote that he had about P&L is people and lives. And I think that again is just very representative of who he is, and such a way to build a business. And I feel like it's very unique nowadays. You don't see a lot of companies putting emphasis on that. And for a CEO to speak to that was just incredible.
Yeah, forever now, P&L is not going to mean profit and loss to me. I mean, that's which are key. The numbers are key, but more important behind it are the people and the lives that it's involved with your business. And if you think about it that way, wow, values and culture is amazing. And, one way he instills that, this just astounded me. They read their values at every staff meeting.
I absolutely loved that. Yeah, I loved hearing that each person has emphasis on a different thing.
Each person does have an emphasis on a different thing. In fact, he had a different person read each podcast, right? I mean, not podcast, but the values at each meeting.
Yep.
So, and what was interesting too, I mean, by doing that, it reminded them why they're in business and gave clarity to their decisions. And I just think that's such an important part. And then the other thing, just in this concept of values and culture, again, so much there, but his preparation was just amazing to me. And he had an incredible sense of patience, but it wasn't like just a passive patience. It was more just allowed for perfect timing. And I thought his story of when he saw Truett Cathy on the plane, he was ready for that moment, even though didn't know Truett would be on the plane. And he did such a great job talking with Truett, in the restroom, washing their hands. They mentioned Truett's book, but it took 10 years for them to get Chick-fil-A as a client. And I know the Truett Cathy story spoke to you.
It did. As a former Chick-fil-A employee, I've really seen the impact of that company and that at work, and hearing that Truett Cathy is the same person at the airport helping somebody as the same as he is with the president. I think that speaks to the what Glenn had spoke about of consistency, who you are at work and at home. And I just think that that's such an important part of business ownership and staying grounded.
Being that consistent leader.
Yep.
Glenn said he wanted to be the consistent Glenn at work and at home.
Yep.
And that's because it means you're living your values. People know what to expect from you. And again, you're in for the long game. So just awesome. A key to that long-term growth and being able to navigate disruptions for Glenn, I got the sense, is leadership. And that's point number 2 I wanted to make. He gave so much insight into best practices there, but I know you had some thoughts about him just leading by example, right?
Yeah, he really exemplifies staying true to yourself and your values and how that will ultimately lead to your success. Again, going back to that consistency of who he is at home and at work, it's such an important quality, and you can really hear how important it is to him.
Definitely. So, we're interested in how to see around corners and manage disruption. Glenn hit that front and center because he talked a lot about challenges that you inevitably face. I mean, they are inevitable. And he, in fact, went so far as to say, they steal our determination, steal, in other words, sharpen. They sharpen our determination and they make us stronger. And I got the sense from him that, leaders actually use those challenges to make the hard decisions. And by the way, I love his easy, hard versus hard, easy decisions. I mean, that's worth going back and listening to too. And driving conversations, but leaders step up and drive those changes in those challenges, and he just showed so many great examples of that. And I love too how I asked him about being stubborn, and he liked the word resilient better. I think he would say, "Hey, let's be stubborn on values, but let's be resilient as we navigate through those challenges and being willing to change." He talked about being fanatically focused on the business. That's so key. But being willing to change smartly, intelligently, with integrity, because that's the job of a leader. So love that point. And then a third point I wanted to focus on here that I think is key to how he navigates disruption and drives to success. And that's how every decision is client-centric for him. Every decision they make as a business revolves around what's best for the client. I think one of your favorite quotes you'd mentioned to me was the growth quote. Do you remember that?
He says growth is a byproduct of clarity in your business, and having that clarity in who you are and your business, it just leads to growth.
Absolutely. So that byproduct, so here, growth is a byproduct of having clarity of focus. So they're not growing to grow. They're focused on clarity of business, and their clarity of business is around the client. So 2 or 3 quick points here. One, he talked about what their dream client is.
Right.
And it's one who has mutual respect with them. And it's also a client that values communications and communication strategy. If the client doesn't have those 2 things, it's not a good fit, and they're comfortable not working with them. But if they do have those things, that's such a great client for them to have, and with mutual opportunity there. So with that kind of clarity, growth will happen. And he talked about how they stayed focused on the client, which determine when they grow, which markets they grow into. They're following their client for growth. They're not trying to pick where they want to grow to unless it's well-founded in that. So I thought that client-centric point, it was so key. And then, growth being a byproduct naturally of that, as your quote pointed out. Final thing I wanted to just reflect on, just personally, is you remember when I asked Glenn about what advice would he have given himself long ago, and he said to relax, right? To be able to get away, take those trips, and focus a little more on family. But and when he said that, I was like, yeah, we all need to learn how to relax, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all business owners. We're all working hard. Of course, we need to relax, but who's really going to relax? But Glenn, as usual, in true Glenn fashion, took it to a higher level.
Right.
He talked about how change of pace plus change of place equals new perspective. Wow. I'll take a vacation with that, right?
Right. I know. And, that reminded me of an episode that's yet to come, but with Dave Moody, who recently climbed Kilimanjaro, and the way that he talks about scaling your business and surmounting your business challenges is so equivalent to that climb of Mount Kilimanjaro, and how once you get to the top, you really realize what's important, and how getting away is really one of those key things that helps him stay grounded as a business owner. So look forward to hearing that in a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave really from the mountaintop made the same point that Glenn is making here.
Yep.
So that means there's got to be a lot of truth to it, right? So
absolutely.
Well, Claudia, fun conversation here. I think, we could keep going on. There's so much richness here. Yes. I'm going to go back and listen to it time and time again, but I hope our audience enjoyed it. Listeners, I hope you got a lot from it, and we will see you on the next episode.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to learn more about exit strategies for business owners? Visit cornercappodcast.com for a free copy of our ebook with everything you need to know to make a smooth transition out of your business. Tune back in next week for another episode.